I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here not with my fantastic co-host Rebecca Wood. She'll be calling in a little later, but it's just you and me right now. We're going to put together a wonderful radio show called For a Green Future. And For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health of your friends and your family and your coworkers and the geese that are trying to figure out if they're supposed to fly south or not, and the seagulls that have decided they're just going to stick it out here, and all the worms and the trees and the birds and the bees and everybody and everything, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together here on this wonderful little planet called Earth. And we have a wonderful show for you today. We do a little bit of reporting on this show, like we're the source, and we go out and talk to the direct people, and especially when we do interviews with guests. But there is a story we're going to be breaking. This is going to be a breaking news story at quarter after, when we have Cathy Cowan Becker, our good friend Cathy Cowan Becker, calling in. You do not want to miss this. This is just one of those things that the state government's trying to do that is just, I remember there was a novel by Kurt Vonnegut. I forget the name of which novel this was exactly, but it was one of the novels that had Kilgore Trout in it, if anybody remembers the Vonnegut novels. But he was describing in this novel, he's describing this crime family that ran this city. And he said, most of the time they just sort of went along and got things done. And, there was a little corruption, but nobody paid much attention to it. But sometimes they would do things that was just so breathtakingly corrupt, it just shocked everyone. And we kind of had that happen this past week with the Thanksgiving break. The utility companies have tried to pull something with the Public Utilities Commission that just, out of the blue, just sort of shocked everyone. And that's what Cathy's going to be calling in about. We'll start talking to her at quarter after. We're just going to chat for another 10 minutes or so. And please feel free to call in at 877-909-1007. Or you can text now at 419-973-5841. And you can text about any kind of ecological or environmental issue. For example, I'm kind of curious, how was your Thanksgiving? What are you thankful for? Did you have a good one? My son and I drove over to Western New York, and we had a great time there. And yes, we drove back through the horrible snowstorm, but we both kind of grew up in Western New York, the Buffalo area, and it was bad, but it was not the apocalypse that the news was kind of making it out to be. When you're from Western New York, you sort of have a measure in terms of how many cars are off the road, in terms of how bad the weather actually is. And we only saw one car. It was actually a truck that was actually off the road because of the weather. But that might partly be because so many people were terrified of driving because of all the news about snow and so forth and lake effect snow and winds. And it was hairy, but we made it fine. And I just wanted to say that if you are somebody who, over Thanksgiving break was like, well, look at all this snow that's coming, there's no global warming. Uh, sorry, we may be about 6 degrees below average today. But what's happening around the world, which is exactly what was predicted by all the mathematical models, is that it's much warmer than it should be in the more northern places. In fact, on Thanksgiving Day, it was warmer in Anchorage, Alaska than it was where we were in Buffalo, New York. And in fact, right now, we might be 6 degrees below average, which is not a lot. But I have on my weather app, I have both Anchorage, because my son used to live there, and that's 19 degrees above average. And the city in Russia that I like to keep an eye on, it's called Zapolyarny, and there it's 20 degrees above average. So, and essentially we're all about the same temperature, even though they are much closer to the North Pole than we are, and they're supposed to be much colder than we are. So we're a little bit under, and they're way over, and that's why we call it global warming, because you have to look at the entire planet instead of just picking out every now and then, every couple of weeks when there's a snowstorm, saying, oh, look, over here it's cold, therefore there must not be any global warming. Well, that was wrong. And I do kind of have a question. Did any of this stuff come up at Thanksgiving? Did anybody broach the subject? Or was this a typical U.S. American Thanksgiving where nobody talks ecology, nobody talks environment, nobody talks politics? I have to confess that's kind of how it was in my household. We sort of touched on things a little bit, but for the most part, we just raved about how good the turkey was and the stuffing. And I actually baked apple pie, and I found this old recipe for the 1940s that I used from an ancient cookbook I have, and they, everybody loved it. So we had a really nice Thanksgiving, and there were babies running around, toddlers running around, and babies being passed around, and it was just, a beautiful time. How was yours? I'd like to ask you that. So also, in terms of Thanksgiving, one of the things that I'm really thankful for, we had our Thanksgiving special last week when we were talking to our good friend Philip Yenyo, and one thing that I didn't sort of focus on, but a lot of Native Americans historically, like if you go back and read speeches from the 1700s and so forth, one thing that Native Americans were always grateful for was water. And they would thank, the Great Spirit for the fact that there is so much water, because they understood that the water was what was responsible for the forests that they lived in, and the streams that fed the forest, and the lakes, the fish, and on the plains, of course, they were always very grateful for water because those were so much drier. So when they did get water, they were very grateful. And it is something that we are still taking advantage of, or taking for granted. And it's looking, like we are not going to learn our lesson. These data centers are coming in, and the main thing they use tons and tons and tons, literally tons of water, 300 to 400,000 gallons a day if they're not, if they don't have recycling water, if they don't have a closed loop system, and then 30 to 40,000 gallons a day even if they do have a closed loop system. And I'm going to say that the water they're wasting, the water they're using, is more valuable than a lot of the data that they're crunching and the numbers that they're coming up with. And so I am grateful that so many people are waking up to this, and I'm seeing more and more activity. This seems to be touching a nerve. This seems to be an environmental issue that is mobilizing people across lines, across political lines. I'm seeing both conservatives and liberals. Everybody is opposed to using all this electricity. Now, electricity is a very important topic, ecologically speaking, and we talk about it a lot because that's our main way that we use energy in this society beyond what we're using for transportation and manufacturing and so forth. And so we have in our system, we have regulated utilities, theoretically regulated. They get to have monopolies over providing electricity in return for regulation. However, what's been happening in the recent years is that they are taking this regulated monopoly and they're using their power to control legislators and legislation and their regulatory agencies. And here in Ohio, the main regulatory agency is supposed to be the Public Utility Commission of Ohio, the PUCO. And what happens is the PUCO looks at all their regulations, and periodically, every 5 years or so, they're supposed to review everything and just sort of decide what stays and what goes out. And in New York here, or Ohio here, what we have is something called net metering when it comes to solar power. And so what has happened is originally the Public Utilities Commission staff looked at it and said, okay, our net metering regulations are fine. We're just going to leave them as they are. But just before Thanksgiving, there was the utility companies did this terrible end run. And I think, do we have Cathy on the line? Yeah. And so let's go to Cathy Cowan Becker now and hear about what just happened. Hi, Cathy. Welcome back to For a Green Future.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. I can hear you fine. So
great.
So this was a little bit of a shocker. I mean, I usually try not to check my email or my Facebook too much when I'm on a vacation, like home for Thanksgiving. But I did, and I saw this email. And could you just sort of tell us what happened here?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, any sort of regulatory rules in Ohio come before the agency that's in charge of them every 5 years, just so the agency can check and see, okay, are these rules still applicable? Is this what we still want to do? And so Ohio's rules about net metering did that. They came before the PUCO. This was back in April. And in early November, an administrative judge there set a date for when people had to have public comments in. And so that date was November 28th, which was the Friday after Thanksgiving. And then the staff of PUCO looked over the rules and said, yes, we think you should just keep them the way they are, just as you mentioned. So, and we should probably go over what net metering is exactly for your audience, but just to finish this part of the story. So the deadline was November 28th, usually around 5 o'clock.
Also known as Black Friday.
Exactly. So, the deadline was over Thanksgiving break, but that deadline was set on November 5th, and the case had been out there since April. So at 4:30 p.m. on November 26th, which was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, when pretty much everybody is getting ready for Thanksgiving, AEP filed a comment. And it basically said, you should completely change net metering rules. We want you to completely blow up the net metering system you have now. And so I heard about this from a friend who emailed me, and she had heard about it from Solar United Neighbors. And they do track these things, and they had an action alert asking people to file comments. But we had 2 days over Thanksgiving holiday and the Black Friday. So I got a hold of the action alert that Solar United Neighbors had put together and added a little bit of information and just started emailing everyone I knew in Ohio who cares about this. I think I included you on one of those emails. And I also posted it on my Facebook and tagged 100 people and apologized for bothering people over Thanksgiving. But we needed people to comment saying they want the net metering rules as is. and have, and get in a lot of public comments, as many as we could, during those 2 days when most people aren't, as you said, even looking at their email.
All right. So now let's
we
look back at and tell everybody what net metering is and why this is so important to the idea of decarbonizing, to the idea of shifting over to a solar powered grid that doesn't depend on fossil fuels or nuclear power.
Yeah, exactly. So if you put solar panels on your roof, like whether you're a business or a home, those panels make electricity. They convert sunlight into electricity during the day. And usually during the day, there's more electricity than that building is actually using. If you have a home battery, that extra electricity goes in the battery. But most people don't, and so then that extra electricity just goes back out onto the grid. Those electrons go literally onto the grid right from your solar panels. And the net metering, that's called net metering. There's a meter that measures how many electrons you're taking into your house and how many you're putting back on the grid. And then under the current system, you get credit for the electrons you're putting back onto the grid because you're basically making the grid more stable. Those electrons are probably going to go into your neighbors' houses. If there's some sort of major power outage, you're helping to tide the grid over that power outage. You're making the whole system more resilient, and also fostering energy independence by putting like a little mini generation system there on your roof. And so current net metering rules, you get credit for that. And that's what allows people to afford solar panels, because that means your electricity bill goes way down. We got solar panels and our bills were $300 to $350 a month. And over the summer, they were literally nothing. We paid nothing, or like $5 or $10. That's called the solar payback time, because since I'm not paying that $300, I'm saving $350 a month. And so then within a few years, that pays off my solar panels, and after that, the energy is free. And
Right.
Most people cannot get solar panels without that. And we do want people to get residential solar to help with, the entire resiliency and energy independence and lowering carbon emissions. Without residential solar, we're going to have a much harder time decarbonizing our whole system. It would probably be impossible.
Well, and it's important to note that, there is a little bit of, there were tax credits that you get for doing an investment like that. But this is actually your money up front that is paying for these. This is you personally are helping to stabilize the grid and lower prices during peak demand for your neighbors with your own money. And so most people don't have that kind of money to just toss away. They need to get a payback on it. It needs to be an investment, not a charity.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Can I ask how big your system is and how much you spent on it?
Oh, gosh, I don't have the figure in front of me how big it is. We have 32 solar panels. It's a pretty big system. Mm-hmm. And we spent the upfront cost was about $35,000, and then we got, when the tax breaks were still here, we got $11,000 back from a tax break, which also helped us pay for it, because we floated our property tax money for that. So we want to be able to pay our property taxes in January. So a lot of people, it's going to be harder for them to afford solar without the tax break, but there are a couple of banks and credit unions that specialize in these sorts of loans. Clean Energy Credit Union is all online, and they specialize in loans for people to get solar panels or electric vehicles. And there's also Climate First Bank, which is in Florida, and they also specialize in that. So it's still going to be possible, but what AEP, as I understand it, basically they wanted to make people, because you're putting electrons back out onto the grid, they wanted to make you pay for transmission costs. And the grid is there. Like, it's been bought and paid for several times over by everyone's regular electric bills, but they wanted to charge you for putting the electrons back onto the grid so that you wouldn't save nearly as much money, and your solar payback time, it might stretch for decades
Yeah.
under that system. And people just, you're taking the last little bit out of what people can afford.
Yeah, it's similar to what the city of Bowling Green is doing to me right now, or to the solar owners there. And they make the argument that solar people aren't paying for the poles and wires, except that they're not mentioning the fact that once excess electricity gets put onto the grid, once a solar owner puts their excess onto the grid, they get to take it and sell it to our neighbors.
Yes,
they're getting their
exactly.
money back, because the way they get the money back from any electricity they sell from any supplier, by paying wholesale and selling it retail. And they do that with every electron the solar owner puts on the grid. So their whole argument is just, it's completely false. It's looking at half the equation. It's like, it's like it's like telling a farmer, okay, I'm going to buy your watermelons, but you have to pay me to ship the watermelons to the store, and you're going to have to pay the workers that are putting the price tags on the watermelons. Then I'll buy your watermelons. It's just,
very much.
So this is kind of outrageous in terms of being this last-minute, super sneaky thing. I mean, I've been searching since I've seen the reports, since I saw the email, and saw the Solar United Neighbors alerts, but I have not found this on any other media. I have not seen it in any papers. I haven't seen any reports on it. I have not been able to find anything as a sneaky strategy. It seems like it's working. They're getting what they want.
Yeah, I haven't seen this covered in any other media either, local or national or media of any sort. We did generate over 100 comments, and I think there's probably some others that came through that haven't been posted yet. So getting over 100 public comments saying keep the net metering rules as they are over 2 days over Thanksgiving is probably pretty good. But yeah, I don't know why. I think you're the only media outlet I know of that's covering this.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to cover it just as hard as we can here, because this is something people should know. Because if this policy change goes through, that pretty much eliminates rooftop solar in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, it's extremely concerning, and we've already are eliminating the tax break under the IRA. That's already being eliminated, and it just makes for a longer payback time. But if the PUCO listens to AEP and guts the net metering rules, then the payback time is going to be completely impossible. And and already utility scale solar is extremely difficult in Ohio, because unlike with fossil fuels, with oil or gas, which local people have zero say-so over, local townships and counties can ban utility scale solar or wind, and about half the counties in Ohio have done that. Right. So it's become extremely difficult to site those larger projects in Ohio, and they say, okay, do it on your rooftop. If this passes, your rooftop's going to become impossible.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that even though half the counties have done it, it's not because half the people in Ohio don't want solar. I think that it still shows, the surveys still show that especially rooftop solar, people do still want solar. But what's happened is a very small, well-organized, corporate-funded sort of astroturf movement has gone to each county in turn and lobbied them to ban solar, which is terrible, because it eliminates an important source of income for their schools, for their counties. And I don't know, have you heard about what they're doing down in Richland County there?
Oh, yes, I think they're organizing a petition to try to overturn that solar ban, which
right. Well, what they've done,
I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, they've succeeded in getting enough petition signatures to put it on the ballot in the in the primary election in May. So we'll see what happens there. It's the first time any of these solar bans are going to be available for the general public to vote on. So fingers are crossed that
Oh, well, yeah, that's great.
that goes well.
That's
yeah.
great. I had read from Jake Zuckerman's reporting that over 2,000 megawatts of solar have been defeated in Ohio of these solar projects, and that would have been enough to power Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati combined. And they keep talking about how we need more electricity, we need more supply in Ohio. Well, here's supply, and
Right.
they're turning it down.
Yeah, and we just
And I think we know why.
2 weeks ago we had Mark Jacobson on, and he reported that in California, even though they've had a huge boom in things like electric cars and data centers and even geothermal heat pumps, electric heat pumps, California's demand has actually dropped 2% because of their rooftop solar, because of the behind the meter electricity that's being generated by people like you and me and many of our
Exactly.
listeners. So
Well, and it shows it can be done. The major
Yes.
power source can be solar or wind. They keep saying there's actually a bill in the legislature now that would label solar and wind as, quote, unreliable. That's not the experience of, areas that are actually using solar and wind.
wow, yeah, I wasn't aware of that one. So basically, just the
Yeah, look
Ohio
out
State
for
Legislature
Senate Bill 294.
294. We'll check into that one, but basically, the Ohio State Legislature again trying to legislate unreality, trying to legislate fantasy into
Yes,
the
very
legal
much.
definition for our state. And all right, well, that's just about all we have time for. Cathy, thanks for coming on at such short notice. And I know this is still the holiday weekend, so I'm sure you had to sacrifice something to come on. But,
No worries at all.
is there anything you'd
Thank
like?
you for having me.
Oh, sure. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move on?
Just if you want to be kept up to date on things like this state legislation, join us at saveohioparks.org, saveohioparks.org. There's a button called Join Now, and if you fill in your information there, we'll add you to our email list, and you'll get notified of things like this.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Cathy.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. All right. That was Cathy Cowan Becker with SaveOhio'sParks.org. And I do want to say she mentioned a couple companies that finance wind and solar installations. I just want to be clear that they're not sponsors of ours. They didn't pay to get mentioned, and we're not endorsing them. I don't have any experience about them, but it's good to know that there are companies like that exist. And another company that we're very happy exists, another organization that we're very happy exists, is the Wood County Park District.
Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place? It's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future.
Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And I also wanted to say that the Wood County Park District just created a foundation because, well, as we know, as we've reported, state funding is being threatened for all the parks in Ohio. And so there's a great opportunity to make a donation that will directly benefit the Wood County Parks. And our show is also brought to you by our wonderful patrons. And those are people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and they chose a membership level that matched their budget. And before you do it, they were helping out the show by giving us a little bit of money every month, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. And we're also, part of the reason we're trying to stream here is because we're sort of revamping our internet presence here on For a Green Future. And so from the entire For a Green Future team, we wanted to say the future isn't imagined, it's built. We are renovating For a Green Future to fit the needs of every generation, new leadership, a refreshed mission, and a digital backbone powered by AI to deliver timely climate action to you. We hired Shabazz Khan as our media and communications specialist. Our media and communications will be connecting people with science, solutions, and stories that matter, faster, clearer, and more accessible than ever. The torch is steady, the flame is bright, and the message is simple. Care for the climate, care for each other, and act with knowledge, because the future belongs to those who prepare today. Visit Joe DeMare foragreenfuture.org to join, learn, and act. Okay, so hopefully we also now have been joined by Rebecca Wood. Hey, Rebecca, are you there?
Hello. I'm
Hi.
here.
Welcome aboard.
Howdy.
So
Thank you.
you're actually calling from Michigan today.
I am, yeah. I'm calling from within view of the Detroit River. At least it would be within view if I was in the living room.
Okay.
I'm not. I'm in the study.
So, and is that the topic of your talk today?
It is, yes, the Detroit River. I thought it would make it relevant to my life again. So yeah, the Detroit River, I've been looking at it out the condo window and wondering what is the deal with this body of water. It is a 28-mile long international waterway, which connects Lake St. Clair in the north to Lake Erie in the south, and therefore really is kind of instrumental in connecting all of the Great Lakes, basically. It's just one of the narrow points, and which also means it basically connects Lake Superior ultimately to the Atlantic Ocean via the St. Lawrence Seaway. So yeah, obviously it forms a chunk of the U.S.-Canadian border because all the way along the Detroit River, you got Michigan on one side and Ontario on the other. Also found the figure 32 miles long, but that was AI and therefore can probably be discounted. I'm going to go with the AmericanRivers.org group being a better source of information than AI, because almost everything is. So yeah, I actually did not know that it's actually fairly common to have rivers that connect two lakes or a lake and an ocean or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know, I assumed that it was the normal river that came from streams and then bigger streams and then smaller rivers and then feeds into this river. But no, that is not the way it works. It just goes from St. Clair to Lake Erie, and that's all it does.
Uh-huh.
And this happens more often than you might suspect, actually. So as such, it has a high volume of commercial shipping traffic and also provides drinking water for 5 million people. And it's considered to be going in the right direction generally eco-health wise, although, two steps up, one step back, but its nadir apparently eco-health wise was in the 1960s, I guess. Also supports many species, including walleye, waterfowl, and now beaver. The beaver are back. That's one of the reasons why it's considered a success story is because a lot of species have come back. But yeah, according to AmericanRivers.org, it was named an American Heritage River in 1997. And threats to it include bacteria, PCBs, PAHs, metals, and oils. And so, I sort of vaguely know PCB and PAH, or at least PCB is bad. I know that, But okay, what does it actually mean? Rebecca has forgotten. In case you have too, It stands for polychlorinated biphenyls, which are chemical compounds made of two linked benzene rings. And then, you sort of just add some chlorine on for decoration, and you got a PCB. PAH, which I had actually not heard of before, is a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, which are formed by incomplete burning of organic matter. So anything coal, oil, garbage even, organic matter that's been partially burnt, basically, also very bad. So the importance of the river, some things it's known for, it's got bald eagles now, it supports a lot of fisheries. I think the lake sturgeon are coming back, and also peregrine falcons and osprey, notably. It also contains the Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge, which is the only wildlife refuge in North America. I did not know that.
Wait.
Or the only international wildlife refuge, I think.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I used the key word there. But yeah, it's vital for the health of the entire Great Lakes, because that's how the Great Lakes work. I mean, they go from Superior, and then they go through a couple more lakes, and then they go through Lake St. Clair down into Erie, and then hence to, she may hear you eat onions, Ontario? Yeah. I use my little mnemonic to remember the lakes and what order they're in. So, yeah, I mean, everything has got to go through this little bottleneck here. So it's kind of important what happens with the Detroit River. Some restoration efforts have included offshore shoal creation. I assume that's somehow... Oh, it's probably important to prevent erosion offshore shoals, I'm guessing, to sort of buffer the waves, possibly, or... Yeah, but also spawning gravel, and stabilizing shorelines to support native vegetation and prevent erosion in general. Some problems, it's still got huge toxic sediment problem, which is very bad. Somebody needs to go in and get that stuff out somehow without spreading it around too much. And it's still considered to be an area of concern under the Great Lakes International Water Agreement. So, yeah, I'm still concerned because I got a drink out of Lake Erie. So, actually, no, that's not true. I think I do drink out of Lake Erie. That's right. Just not the Maumee River, I think. Anyway.
Right.
No, it is the Maumee River. Toledo gets its drinking water out of the Maumee River, I think, from upstream.
But Toledo gets
further.
it from Lake Erie, and Bowling Green gets it. Bowling Green gets it from the Maumee.
I thought we were buying, Toledo was buying water from Maumee or something.
They also do that, but they have, they have intakes in Lake Erie, big ones. You can see them from the shore.
That makes sense, because, I remember after the water crisis, they put in sensors so we can tell when the green slime is getting too close to our intake.
Right.
So that makes sense. You must be telling the truth.
All right.
That all adds up. Anyway,
well,
that is the fun facts about the Detroit River. Maybe sometime when I'm up here, I'll do Belle Isle, which is right in the middle of it.
Oh yeah. Well, it's nice to hear a mostly successful success story. It's nice to hear that the Detroit River is improving and has improved quite a bit. That's great.
Well, it's better than what it was. Yeah, definitely, which is what we want. We want actually really, really good instead of just not as bad as it was, but we'll take it for now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
All right. And we will hopefully have Rebecca in studio next week. Okay. Now it's time to go on to ecological news. And our first story, we're going to keep things a little bit positive and upbeat. And now that Rebecca has made her report, you could join us at any time, 877-909-1007, or you could text 419-973-5841. Okay, first story. This is from KTLA in California, of all places. This is a story on November 19th. Amtrak sets all-time ridership record. And in the period from October 24 through September 2025, there were 34.5 million trips Americans took on Amtrak. and that's up 5.1% from the previous year. So that's a pretty big increase. There was also increases in ticket sales. It went up to $2.7 billion in ticket sales. That's a 9.1% increase. And also, it was a record number of miles traveled. So people are both traveling on the trains more often, and they're using the trains for longer trips. So this isn't just, New York City commuters. This is all over the country, especially since they've created new lines, like along the Gulf Coast. And they've got a new line from Chicago to Minneapolis, all way more popular than expected. The Amtrak has also invested a lot in another $5.5 billion in capital projects the past year. They've built more car washes, which is, that's not kids with buckets. No, that's the car washes for the rail cars. And so they're investing in that, bridges, more tracks. They are on track with this kind of growth to be a profitable organization, a profitable company by 2028. And because they've been tasked with that, they've been told you have to start making a profit and stop being, something the government subsidizes, which is, kind of short-sighted, because in most European countries, government does subsidize their trains, and that's one reason they have such wonderful rail travel. But Amtrak is on track to be profitable by 2028. Okay, next story. And this is from, basically I got this information off of Facebook, because this seems to be the only place where this is happening. A few weeks back, we had a fellow talking about the blockade that they've done up in British Columbia to try to protect the last remaining old growth. There was a place called Cougar Camp, where they had this beautiful sculpture of a cougar that was made with wood that had been salvaged from old growth trees that had been cut down. They're calling themselves now the Walbrand Forest Blockade. And unfortunately, what happened in this past week is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the Royal, thugs, went and broke up the camp. They went in there and they set fire to everything. They burned down the beautiful cougar sculpture, threw gasoline on it and lit it on fire. They arrested 5 people, and they were pretty rough with all those protesters. They're enforcing a court injunction that allows timber companies to cut down old growth. The thing is that this is all a repeat kind of what happened at Fairy Creek 5 years ago, which we reported on extensively. Again, a very old growth cut of forest which should never have been logged, because it's in bad position. It's on a slope. It's and we should not. Scientists are telling us we should not cut down a single old growth tree anymore, because those are the most effective at sequestering carbon. They're the best at pulling CO2 out of the air, way better than the carbon capture schemes that the politicians want us to blow money on. But what happened at the end of that, because that was such a black eye for Canada, who likes to, they like to be seen as being in touch with nature and, more ecologically sensitive than the U.S. does. And so they said, all right, we're going to have an expert panel. We're going to bring in forestry experts and biologists. So we're going to look at our whole old growth policy and come up with a new policy. And so they did that 5 years ago. And the biologists and old growth experts, first thing they did was they identified all the remaining old growth. And then they said, okay, we've got to protect this. This should never, none of this should ever be logged. And what has happened instead is that the timber companies have taken those studies and said, there's the old growth. And they have focused all their efforts on cutting down the remaining old growth. So rather than the promise by the political party in power there, the NDP, the National Democratic Party, which is acting suspiciously like a lot of parties here in the U.S., they have accelerated the old growth cutting. And so the protesters, a lot of the people who were at Fairy Creek, are going back into the woods again, and they're creating these blockades. Even though the police broke up Cougar Camp, they have fallen back and created a new camp called Beaver Camp. And again, the elder Bill Jones is, he's a member of the indigenous tribe that lives in that area, and he is helping to maintain the protesters and sort of give a spiritual backing for what's going on. If you want to keep up with this one is not being well covered by the media. All this RCMP brutality is kind of happening on the quiet, but you can there's a Facebook page, search for Fairy Creek Blockade, or it's ADA 'ITSX / Fairy Creek Blockade. ADA Fairy Creek Blockade. Very difficult to report on the radio. So that's some bad news. And some more bad news. Unfortunately, this is a story in Outdoor Life on November 19th. And the title is, "This Mind-Boggling Commercial Fishing Practice is Robbing Alaska's Anglers." And what it is, they're talking about trawl fishing. And these trawlers go out and they catch millions of pounds of fish that they're not trying to catch. Okay, they're after the pollock and the flounder, which are commercial species that they can sell. And every year they pull out 3 to 4 billion pounds of pollock and flounder. But in the process, they also kill about 3 million pounds of herring, about 4.5 million pounds of halibut, and millions more pounds of crabs, and they kill a bunch of killer whales. The killer whales get caught in the nets. And one of the focal points is they kill about 90,000 salmon a year. And the salmon in Alaska are having trouble. Their populations are declining. And so what's happened is they've signed treaties that prevent subsistence fishermen in Alaska. In other words, tribal members who've lived off salmon their entire, for thousands and thousands of years, plus sports fishermen. Nobody gets to fish salmon out of rivers anymore. But one of the reasons there are no more there's so few salmon is because they're being killed in these trawling nets and then just tossed into the ocean, after they've died. So charter fishermen are very upset about this because there's a huge charter fishing business, or there was a huge charter fishing business in Alaska. It's being wiped out. The subsistence fishermen are, of course, kind of desperate because this was a very important food source in Alaska for tens of thousands of years. But even as they do this, they're increasing the amount of bycatch, the number of other fish that trawlers can catch. And so the argument is that commercial trawlers get to waste while the subsistence and sport fishermen have to conserve. And that just doesn't make any sense. So believe it or not, the super conservative Alaska legislature is actually considering banning or regulating trawler fishing for the first time ever. So let's hope they succeed, and let's hope those subsistence farmers especially can go back to fishing, because right now there was a treaty just signed with Canada. They've been banned from fishing in their own rivers for the next 7 years, and so there are actually children in these indigenous communities who've never had salmon that their families have fished. So, all right, moving on. Next story, The Ecologist on 11/18. The title is COP30 Must Declare an End to ISDS. And I'm also drew from a website called bothends.org for this story. And ISDS, it's not a chemical. It's an investor-state dispute settlement. And essentially what happened with a lot of trade treaties, like NAFTA and GATT, and treaties like that, businesses have stuck in there this idea that if a company or a country passes a law that changes in regulations, like environmental regulations, so that they don't get to do what they usually do, then they can sue those countries for passing a law like that. And this has been happening a lot, especially with oil and gas, where a country will say, okay, we're not going to develop oil and gas in this area. And then the oil and gas companies come back and say, oh, wait a minute, I wanted to drill there. You have to pay me money. And to give a sense of scale, last year in the UK, the UK was sued for $80 billion in these ISDS payments. And in the Amazon River, there's hundreds of oil and gas projects that were approved with the previous administration that would wipe out the Amazon. The current administration changed the laws, but now the Brazilian government is being sued for billions and billions of dollars because they're trying to protect their land. Some treaties have already canceled. A few countries announced they were canceling the ISDS portions of their trade treaties at COP, which is nice. The EU has already internally canceled all those ISDS provisions, so that's nice. But it's still a huge problem, and it's become more money now is being spent to pay off the oil and gas companies than is being spent on actually solving the climate crisis in a lot of countries. So we need to be aware of that. Speaking of states giving lots of money to companies that don't deserve it, on 10/29, this is directly from Governor DeWine's website. DeWine announces $100 million for gas and nuclear. So over the next 5 years, Governor DeWine wants to give $100 million of our tax dollars to gas companies, to fracking companies, and to nuclear power companies. This money is for building pipelines, for creating SMRs, small modular reactors. The governor claims he wants to do this because he wants Ohio to be a leader, but with this policy, choosing nukes and fracking over wind and solar, he's trying to lead us back into the 1950s in terms of our energy policy. And the whole world is actually moving on from fossil. We've been reporting on that quite a bit, and the move away is accelerating. So the more we commit to the old energy sources, the further behind we're going to be. So rather than leader, maybe it would be more accurate to call DeWine a retreater in terms of energy policy. It's also going to be used to, he also announced the expansion of uranium enrichment, and that is just another dead end technology. So boo on DeWine, and this PUCO thing that we reported on with Cathy, that is also on DeWine because it's his Public Utilities Commission. And we saw from what happened with Sam Randazzo, who he appointed to head the Public Utilities Commission, is all too often the PUCO is more concerned with profits, with guaranteeing the profits of the utility companies than you and me, than our electric bills, which is actually their purpose. They're there to serve us, not the businesses, but too often with policies like changing net metering rules, they would be serving the businesses and not the consumers. All right, we are moving right along here. Next story. This is from the BBC on October 23rd. Donray waste particle, most radioactive find for 3 years. So what happened in Scotland, the UK decided to build an experimental fast breeder reactor there. They built it back in the 1950s. Unfortunately, the fuel rods started crumbling, and so, which is a real danger with fast breeder reactors because you've got this really dense stuff flowing over the fuel rods really quickly, and so little bits and pieces kept flaking off, and then those bits and pieces would just get dumped right into the ocean, right there in Scotland off Donray, and these particles contain cesium-135 or 137 in deadly levels. And so they actually they started cleaning up in the 1980s, and they managed to shut the thing down in 1994. But the cleanup is expected to take 300 years. They have a cleanup schedule that goes out to 2333. And, it's great in terms of stable employment. The cleanup of this closed nuke plant is the largest employer in the Highland area, but these people are being exposed to radiation and doing their jobs. And I wanted to report on this especially because this is, another story of long-term damage from the nuclear industry. But I wanted to report on this because this was also covered by a website called The Cool Down. And the Cool Down's reporting of this story, re-reporting of the BBC story, was propaganda. It was pro-nuclear propaganda because they said in there, they just stuck a paragraph in there, a pro-nuke paragraph, that say nukes are a perfect complement to wind and solar power. And that is 100% false. Nukes push wind and solar off the grid. So it's either nukes or renewables. And so let's pick renewables. Okay, final story. Very sad story. Sorry to end on a really down note. Ukraine has a tremendous nuclear scandal right now. It's bigger, believe it or not, than our HB6 scandal. A direct aide to Volodymyr Zelensky is directly involved. Apparently, the nuclear industry, they took bribes on everything. And they increased the cost of nuclear power in Ukraine by about 15% just from the corruption. And the thing about this is that Russia has not struck nuclear power plants in Ukraine directly. In fact, it seems to be the only infrastructure that Russia doesn't strike. And so the fact that these are the most corrupt, this is the most corrupt industry in a country that is fighting for its life, the corruption scandal is hurting Volodymyr Zelensky in a way that nothing else has. And so the Russian bombs didn't bring down the Zelensky government, but it's starting to look like the nuclear power scandal, the corrupt nuclear industry, is going to destroy one of the most important democracies on the planet right now because of corruption. So just another horrible reason not to get into nuclear power. We know here in Ohio they're as corrupt as anything is possible to be corrupt. So let's say no nukes. Let's say yes, wind and sun. And let's come on back here next week. This is Joe DeMare. Thank you for listening. Signing off.
You believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!